Fighting has escalated in Iran, and the president now says the memorandum of understanding is over.
You need to hold them accountable, and there needs to be repercussions for their bad acting.
I'm Kristen Eskow. On this week's Capitol Conversations, we go one-on-one with Republican Congressman Tony Wied of Wisconsin as we discuss the bipartisan housing bill and the president's demand on the Senate to pass voter ID legislation.
It's time that the Senate acts and does the right thing.
Do you think doing the right thing means blowing up the filibuster? Plus, how the Farm Bill could provide more dairy to SNAP recipients.
It's almost like a buy one, get one free.
Before coming to Congress, he was a small business owner. That's where we begin on this week's Capitol Conversations. So I want to first talk a bit about your background, because before you came to Congress, you were a business owner. You operated several gas stations and convenience stores in the Green Bay area and then went on to open several Little Caesars restaurants. Tell me why you decided to become a business owner.
Well, look, thank you again for having me here, Kristen. I was always one that liked to lead. I was very much interested in team sports. When I was a child, I enjoyed playing football and hockey and other sports. And just always really liked that team environment, and of course was very competitive. So being in my own business, which is truly the American dream, it is the greatest country in the world where we even have the opportunity to run our own business, is something that I always wanted to do. And really started in my own businesses when I was like 11, 12 years old, and did that all the way through college. And then really, again, having the opportunity of living in the greatest country, was able to be in our own business. And I say our because my wife and I and our family worked in a business which was convenience stores, gas stations. We ultimately got into Little Caesars Pizza and car washes and just a variety of other things. And owning a business is one of the most difficult things that you can do, to be able to lead an organization and be able to balance the books and offer what people want and oftentimes solve problems for people. That's always a good business. But again, I was just very fortunate, and we worked extremely hard, just like all small businesses do. And I had the great opportunity to do that for almost 30 years, then sold our business, and now have even a greater opportunity in being able to serve the people of Wisconsin's 8th district in our country.
And what did you learn from your time as a business owner that's helped you in your work now as a lawmaker?
It's all about people, relationships. I've always believed in being respectful towards other people. Respect isn't something that's given. It is truly earned. But I always do treat, even if you didn't have respect for the way people act, I've always felt like you got to act respectfully towards them. But you do have to work with people. And I think that's one of the greatest things. It's also sometimes one of the more difficult things. But it also requires discipline. You have to have personal discipline in order to run a business and be successful. A motivation kind of comes and goes, but you need to be willing to have the discipline each and every single day. Be willing to make very difficult decisions at times in order to, to do the right thing. So I think having the background of being a business owner and successfully running a business for a long time really does, I think, give me a perspective that may be different than others in Congress. I think oftentimes politics is very much a career. People get into it and do it for their whole life. I think it should be more, civil servants. I think, having worldly experience, actually, being out in the real world and maturing, I think it can be a very positive thing. That was mine. And I take that perspective every single day to Congress. And I think it's been very helpful.
So why did you choose to run for Congress?
It's a good question. I was very blessed. We sold our business in 2022. And it certainly was a blessing to be able to do that. But I think that because we have such amazing rights that I believe our founding fathers also agreed that come from God, I think we have certain unalienable rights, things like free speech and, just our basic freedoms and liberties, which means they can never be taken away by man if they come from God. But I also believe what comes with that And in order to live in a free society, a constitutional republic like ours, we have also unalienable duties to be involved civically. And whatever that means, whether that means just being involved and understanding the issues, supporting folks that are in positions of elected office. And in my case, I felt like I had the ability and I had the desire and I quite frankly felt the obligation to serve. And so I feel like it's something that I needed to do. I've always felt that way. And this is a way for me to give back and serve the people of Wisconsin's 8th District and the country. So I take this as a duty, and I believe that it is my duty to do this.
You talked a bit about how your background as a business owner gives you a unique perspective. And I know one concern right now among business owners is the fluctuating energy prices we've seen during the Iran war. And we did see another spike in oil prices amid the escalating fighting in the war this week. What do you say to business owners who are worried about these fluctuating oil and gas prices and the impact that they're having?
Well, certainly having high energy prices is a concern for everybody, no matter who it is throughout our country. And what we saw during the Biden administration, where we had this focus at the federal level of focusing on the Green New Deal and all of these things, really did raise prices to unsustainable levels. President Trump and the administration and I agree that we need to be energy dominant in this country. We need to focus on making sure that we do not need to go around the world and buy our energy, whether that's natural gas or coal or oil. We need to have, we need to be self-sustainable here and even be able to sell our minerals to our friends and allies around the world. We're in a situation now, as you know, during the first year of the administration and my first year, prices came down on fuel, on gasoline from the Biden levels. We're dealing with right now, obviously, a major issue that is a major geopolitical issue. 47 years ago, we had, a terrorist regime take over the country of Iran, and they've been wreaking havoc on the world ever since. So the president has acted decisively here and wants to take away the nuclear threat. So short term, there are some issues, but I believe the president is focused on stopping the never-ending wars that have been ravaged our country and our world, I think, for certainly my lifetime, and bringing peace about the world. But you have to use leverage. You have to hold these bad actors accountable. And I think the president and the vice president are doing the right thing. And it is my hope, and I think it will happen, that we'll find a peaceful resolution. Because again, the president is focused on a peaceful resolution.
You mentioned before never-ending wars, and we saw the two sides reach the memorandum of understanding, but now President Trump says that is, quote, over. Are you worried that this is turning into a prolonged conflict?
Well, certainly the memorandum of understanding isn't being followed when you have the leaders of Iran that are, shooting ships in the straits of Hormuz. I think they're very clear. The president's very clear, saying, "Hey, look, you can't do that. If you do that, there's going to be repercussions," and that's what's happening right now. So, look, what the whole idea of the president and the administration is to have the right thing for the people of Iran and for their country, and for them to be a functioning country throughout the world, and be able to, actually be a part of trading with the rest of the world and all that. But they can't continue to fund Hamas and Hezbollah. They can't continue to be a nuclear threat to other countries, including ours. So I think the president's been very clear. We continue to maintain the leverage. And I think the Iranian people need and want this. And I think they just need to come to the table, not stop shooting ships in the Strait of Hormuz, let the goods flow through there. And again, I'm hopeful that we'll have a positive resolution to a conflict that's been going on for a very, very long time.
Do you think the president made the right call by saying that the MOU is over?
Well, these are very difficult situations, and I think you can't have, they cannot break the memorandum. They're working towards a resolution that I think is going to be in the benefit of the Iranian people and the world. But you need to have, leverage on this, and you need to hold them accountable, and there needs to be repercussions for their bad acting, which includes, like I said, shooting at ships in the Strait of Hormuz. They can't do that.
I also wanted to ask you about the housing bill, because we did see that pass with overwhelming bipartisan support. Yet, as we speak, the president still has not signed that bill into law because he wants the Save America Act passed, which doesn't have the votes to pass right now in the Senate amid the 60 vote threshold. Is the president making a mistake by not signing that housing bill into law?
Well, over 80% of the American people think that you should be a citizen and show ID to vote. And so I think the president is actually holding the Senate accountable, saying, hey, we need to get this legislation done. If you vote in a federal election, you need to be a citizen and you need to show ID to vote. And so what the president's doing here is anything he can to try to persuade those in the Senate to do the right thing and to do the will of the American people. I think the housing bill is good legislation. I think it will ultimately get passed. And I think, there is needed reform there. And of course, keeping Wall Street out from buying up our homes and trying to figure out ways of reducing local regulations so that people can build homes. Good developers and builders can build homes for our youngsters. My kids are getting to that age now where they're going to be buying their first home, and it's getting priced out. And a lot of that has to do with regulations. It has to do with Wall Street coming in and buying up the home. So the president is using this as a leverage point. I think he's doing the right thing. But ultimately, the Senate needs to act on the Save America Act. People want this. They don't want illegal aliens voting in our elections or any sort of fraud in elections. And it's time that the Senate acts and does the right thing.
Do you think doing the right thing means blowing up the filibuster to get that passed if needed?
Well, I'm in the House of Representatives. It's my first term here, so still learning all of the mechanisms that are in place for the House of Representatives. But everything I've looked into and have heard, including from our senator here in Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson, it's my belief that we should not have the filibuster. We should take that away, and let's get to work for the American people and deliver what the American people demanded in the 2024 election. And that's what we need to do, because by getting rid of the filibuster, then you only need 51 votes in order to pass the legislation that, again, the American people are demanding. They want only citizens voting, and they want every single person to show ID to make sure that they're a citizen to vote.
I know you mentioned before the housing bill you believe will still become law, and we are toward the end of the 10-day window where it would automatically become law if the president doesn't take any action on it. What do you think ultimately the impact will be if this housing bill does indeed become law on folks who are trying to buy homes?
Well, the housing bill is good legislation. Again, I think we need to keep Wall Street from buying up our homes and turning people into renters. It's one of the best ways to create wealth is to own a home. Like I said, my children are younger in their early 20s, and they're going to be buying their homes, first home soon. But I also think there's really issues with local regulations. It's very difficult to build homes. There's a lot of regulations for developers and builders to be able to build affordable homes for people. And there's a lot of energy requirements and things like that have been part of, I think, nonsense legislation, environmental legislation that has increased the cost of homes as well. So we need to do the right thing. I think it's good legislation. It will help in the future in allowing for people to get into their first home and making it more affordable.
I know we also saw recently the Supreme Court ruling that upheld birthright citizenship, and several Republicans have in response talked about passing new legislation to limit birthright citizenship. And the president called on Congress to act, and he believes a constitutional amendment wouldn't be necessary. What do you think that could look like in terms of legislation to put new limits on birthright citizenship?
Well, I don't think the founding fathers ever intended for it to be the way it is right now. I mean, when you look back at the amendments, great amendments, obviously, in ending slavery and of course, the children of slaves to be citizens. That is it was very, very good and thoughtful legislation. But what we have right now is essentially tourism for people to have their kids be citizens. I've seen even in territories that are Mariana Islands would be an example of a territory in our country. You have people that will literally fly there and then give birth, and then their son or daughter is a citizen. We have evidence of leaders of the Communist Party in China traveling to the Mariana Islands and having children, and then all of a sudden now they're citizens. Essentially, this interpretation by the Supreme Court would say that even if somebody was flying over the country, essentially their child is a citizen. So it's something that needs to be fixed, and I think it can be congressionally. We're looking into that as how that can be done. But I think we need to get rid of the tourism, get rid of the fact that people come across our border and have children just so that they are citizens. That is not the intention of the founding fathers, nor do I think the American people want that.
Would you support absolutely eliminating birthright citizenship, or do you think that, certain limits would be doable and allow birthright citizenship for, children of U.S. citizens, let's say?
Well, look, I mean, if you're an illegal alien and you have a child here, they should not be a citizen. They're not citizens of our country. If you are a citizen, of course, that makes sense. So, yeah, I'm absolutely for eliminating. If you are a legal alien having a child here, they should not be.
I also wanted to ask you about the Farm Bill, because I know agriculture is a big issue that you really care about. What's it in the Farm Bill that's passed the House that could benefit Wisconsin farmers?
Well, I'm very honored to be part of the Agriculture Committee in the United States Congress. It's very much a part of our culture here in Wisconsin's 8th District in Wisconsin. We're one of the largest districts for dairy in the entire country. And if you just look at the northern half of Wisconsin, we have a lot of dairy farms. We're the second largest dairy state in the country. And so for me to be able to represent and focus on our way of life here, there is a lot of jobs that are, part of the agriculture industry. So I was very honored to be able to put some great amendments in this farm bill, which one includes incentives for those that are on SNAP, that if they buy things like yogurts and hard cheeses and whole milks, they're actually incentivized, almost like a buy one, get one free. There's a lot of great reasons for that. One is people that are on SNAP, it encourages them to buy healthy foods, which dairy is extremely healthy. As you know, the administration has flipped the food pyramid on its head and really is focusing on good, healthy, whole foods. And dairy is one of them. Great proteins, great healthy fats. But we want people that are vulnerable in our communities using SNAP to be able to buy more dairy. It certainly, again, like I said, it allows for more nutrition, better outcomes for people, but it really helps our dairy industry. The more we can get people trying it and eating it and getting good results from a health perspective, the more customers we'll have in the future. I believe that we should have more cows. We should have, our great farmers here and dairy farms. We have a lot of, there's 3 generations working on the farm. I'm seeing a lot of the next generation wanting to take over their farm. And that comes from, I think, the government, and my role is to help get out of the way and allow them to do the great work that they do and continue to improve the quality of life here in northeastern Wisconsin, which is, again, very much an agriculture way of life.
I know the Senate is still working on its version of the Farm Bill. Are you worried that this won't get over the finish line into the president's desk this year?
No, I'm not worried. Certainly concerned with any modifications. And the legislative process is very much messy. It's very slow, and you have to have both chambers of the House and the Senate, both chambers of the legislative branch, come together and agree on something. I know the Senate is working very, very hard on it right now, and I'm sure they'll send something back to us. But we need to get the Farm Bill done. This Farm Bill was done by sitting in barns and in pastures, talking with farmers throughout the country and doing the right thing, providing stability. And again, pulling back regulations. And we want to allow our farmers to do the right thing. It's not only economic security in our country, but it's also national security. And so it has to get done. I think the Senate will be back soon, and I hope we can get something done here in September.
I also wanted to ask you about the midterm elections. We just saw Graham Plattner in Maine drop out of the Senate race, and now Democrats there are going to have to pick a new nominee. What do you think this all means for the balance of power in the Senate?
Yeah, well, in the Senate, I think it is very much, people are going to see that Republicans have been focused on delivering for the American people. Republicans alone And this was very partisan, and I'm happy to say that. I'm often very bipartisan, and I love working with folks across the aisle on issues that matter. But when you're talking about tax cuts for hardworking Americans, no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, the largest deduction, tax decrease for seniors, looking at increased child tax credit, Republicans did that alone. All Democrats voted against lowering taxes for hardworking Americans. And I think that's going to be very important. People need to understand that Democrats get in, they want higher taxes. We also have secured the border. 20 million people have come across our border during the Biden administration. Republicans alone have secured the border, stopped the invasion across our border, and funded the great men and women in law enforcement. I think that's a very big thing. I mean, my job is to put more money back into people's pockets and provide a safer and secure communities throughout our country. We're going to continue to deliver that. Republicans are the party of common sense. And what you're seeing in the Democrat Party is that constant slide towards socialism and communism and recklessness. And again, we're going to be focused on common sense as Republicans, helping people with their quality of life. And that's what we're going to do every single day.
I'm curious what your thoughts are about the situation with Graham Plattner, because we saw several of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the House and Senate who had endorsed him. What are your thoughts on what's happened there and how the Democratic Party is trying to navigate this?
Again, the Democrat Party is shifting farther and farther left, farther and farther towards that crazy radical ideology, and that's really unfortunate. Our job as citizens in this constitutional republic that we call the United States of America, the greatest country in the world, is to elect moral and ethical leaders. There was definitely red flags with this individual from the beginning, but Democrats continue to focus on winning elections over doing what's right. And they knew there was issues with this individual. There was a lot of issues. And now they're obviously getting a lot of pressure and they're pulling those endorsements. But from the beginning, that's why, again, it is so important we elect moral and ethical leaders. Anybody that acts like that, whether they're running for Congress or they're in Congress, need to get out. And again, we need to focus on putting good people in that are moral and ethical. And that's my job as representing Wisconsin's 8th Congressional District. And I'm glad if people are acting like that, they have no business being in the Congress.
What do you think Republicans need to do to make sure they hold on to control of the House and Senate?
Well, we have been delivering, and again, as Republicans, providing for the largest tax decrease for hardworking Americans, incentivizing businesses to reinvest in our country, delivering safer communities by closing the border and funding the great law enforcement to make sure that we have a secure border so that we don't have all the drug cartels and sex trafficking that was coming across. But unfortunately, Democrats are shifting more towards socialism and communism, where people are wanting more from the government. And I believe in limited government. I believe in that you have the American dream, just like I had, in owning my own business and having that ability to do that. We need to push back against socialism and communism. That is the Democrat Party. Voting for Republicans puts more money back into your pocket, safer communities, and that's what Republicans are going to continue to deliver. And that's what people wanted in the 2024 election, and I think you're going to see that in midterms, and I think we're going to continue to hold the majority and continue the mandate that people gave us in 2024.
Finally, we saw just a few days ago the celebration of America's 250th birthday. What have some of your reflections been about this milestone in our history?
Well, I think we're blessed to live in the greatest country in the world. Again, this was an experiment 250 years ago. To be able to hold this together is it's just a complete honor. And I'm very, very grateful to live in our country, and I'm grateful to serve. And I think, again, the best government set up and the best country in the world. So what a great a celebration in Washington, D.C. It certainly was something that people really enjoyed. But what I saw in all of the small, what I call real America, the small towns throughout the 8th District here in Wisconsin, was pride. People that love our country and that are willing to get involved and be their very best. I think that is our duty, to be our very best, be self-sustainable. But again, I saw a sense of pride like you wouldn't believe throughout our district here and all the great towns. Main Street USA, real America. we're proud Americans, and we're willing to continue to fight to keep our freedoms.
And that's all for this week's Capitol Conversations. Thanks so much for joining us. For more videos like this, click on other headlines on this app. Reporting from Capitol Hill, I'm Kristen Eskow.